says she's identified her game plan. Good, awesome. That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Awesome. Well, cool. As we do at the start of these classes, we've got Phil Fiddler here from Inspiro. So, Phil, are you ready?
I'm always ready.
All right, take it away.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to welcome you and introduce myself. And I have a new teammate here. This is Jamie. She's my daughter and has just recently joined our team and is currently in the process of getting herself licensed. So there'll be someone of a younger generation down here very shortly to help you guys succeed. I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys heard about rate increase by the Federal Housing Finance Agency last week, which is the governing body of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They increased rates by 50 basis points or half a point. And that threw off a big stir in the industry. But I wanted you guys to know that that increase strictly affected refinances. It has nothing to do with purchases. They've been overwhelmed so much over the past few months with these fantastic low rates that I don't know, I guess they just decided they needed to pad their pockets a little bit more, which didn't make us feel good, but it has zero effect on the rates for purchases. They're still fantastic with great credit. You're looking at 2.5% on conventional for 30-year fixed and 2.25% on FHA. So great time to be buying a house. You guys are in the market at a great time. And if there's anything either Jamie or myself or anyone at Inspiro, either here or in California, can do to help you guys out, we would love to do it. So that's all I got, Russ.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it. Any questions from you guys for Phil before he jumps off?
Yeah, actually, I have one. So I was just trying to write down the numbers real quick. So if I ever have someone ask me, I can tell them. You said 2.5 on conventional and 2.25 on FHA. Is that right?
Well, when lenders are going to quote you credit, they're always going to quote you their best rate, obviously.
Absolutely.
And there are always factors that play into that. Not so much on FHA, but definitely on conventional loans, which the credit scores and the down payment are very important. But yeah, if you can go onto our website or you can check with us at any time and we can give you current rates on any program that you're looking at and you can pass that on to your clients.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Anybody else? Last chance before Russ gets you.
Can we repeat the information about the refinancing again? Sorry.
I didn't hear.
Okay, she said, can you repeat the information about the refinancing?
Yeah, the FHFA is the governing body over conventional lenders, which are everything Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. And they've been so inundated over the past few months with refinances, and the rates have continued to drop. People that refinanced at the first of the year are thinking about doing it all over again. And this creates a lot of stress, and it actually costs lenders a lot of money when that happens. So just due to the current market fluctuations and the uncertainty going ahead, they just felt they needed to pad the fund a little bit deeper, and they just randomly decided that they were adding 50 basis points to any refinance transaction closing September 1 or later. So pretty much, if you haven't locked in by now, you're not closing before September. It's a fee. So if you're borrowing $200,000, then what it cost you last week, this week it's going to cost you an extra $1,000 to get that same rate. So your rate's either going to be about 1/8% higher, or you're going to have to pay a discount of 0.5% to get the same rate. but they're still great rates. They're just
Yeah.
not as great as they were last week. That help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, anyone else? Last chance. Then Phil's gonna go do some refinances. I'm just kidding.
I'm doing purchases right
Oh,
now.
okay, good.
I love those.
I'd rather you do that anyway.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we'll have a great class. Let us know if we can help you out, okay?
Cool. Thanks, Phil.
Okay.
See ya. All right. Well, hey, before we get going, I just always want to start. Same thing. So what I had told you guys yesterday, I think we might have a few people that were not on before. So I've got my computer screen going that has a close up of what the board of things that I'll be writing on the board and stuff. But then the video that you're seeing me now on is a wider screen. So if you want to jump to the other one that is showing the C21 Everest, you can pin it up there if you're wanting to be able to see what I'm writing on the board. So just so you guys are aware on that. Now, as we get going though, any questions? Like, so we've had 2 full days that we've been together and talking and giving you some really good information and things, but any specific questions on anything we've talked about so far? All right, I'm going to take that as a no then. All right. Well, so what we're going to do today now. So we're going to jump into today. So kind of think of it this way. So far, what we've been talking about is we talked about the foundation, basically the 6 things you need to have. We then went in and did a business plan to help you get a plan put together. Then yesterday, we talked about time management, of being able to understand how to manage your time. And also then we started talking about how to work your sphere of influence and things like that. Well, now today, what we're going to get into is we're going to start talking about lead generation and how do we go make money now in this business and how do we get deals and things to come about. So where we're going to start is I'm going to give you actually a little bit of, and I've told you part of this already, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of the story on me and when I started into real estate and kind of just the journey that I went through. And the idea of that is to help you reduce this journey so that it doesn't take you as long as it took me to get my business up and running. And so that's the plan of what today's going to look like. And then between this morning and this afternoon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list up here. We're going to write down a list of all the ways that you could go out and generate business or leads. And then we're going to talk about, okay, how do I work them now in an effective manner? And so really kind of think of today is going to be about generating leads, but also into then converting them into an appointment is really what we want to do, because that is the secret to success in this business, is you turning those things into appointments. So with that, let me give you my background. And so I'm going to tell you a story, but as I tell you the story, I'm going to draw up on the board here some stuff so that you can see what the process looks like. Now, yesterday, as we talked about the sphere of influence, I drew this up here yesterday as well, where I drew up this learning curve, and that was pretty poorly done. So let me redo that. There we go. All right, so this is the learning curve. This is what I've drawn up here on the board. And this is half of a bell curve. Well, the process that you are going to go through now, assuming most of the people that are on here are newer from what I have seen, but even if you're not new, if you have been in the business for a little while, this still applies to you. So don't tune me out if that's the case. So I'm going to break this down into some categories, okay? Now, what I'm going to show you is this journey or this process that you're going to go through in your real estate career. And what happens is, and so with, I've been all week picking on Philip because he's just waiting to get his license. So he, as far as I know, the newest person here. But here's what the process is going to look like. Now, remember, I drew this learning curve up here yesterday. And I talked to you about how the process that growing your sphere of influence is going to look similar to this learning curve. Well, what we're going to talk about today is how this learning curve works for you in terms of you getting your real estate career going as well. So think of this line here, this learning curve, as being the process you're going to go through. And the first phase you're going to go through is what we would call the activities phase. Now, we talked about activities management yesterday. We talked about productive time, indirectly productive, and non-productive time. Now, this activities phase here that I'm referring to is going to be all of the stuff that would fall into the non-productive phase. Meaning, as soon as you get your real estate license, you are like, okay, I got to learn how to fill out the paperwork, and I got to learn how to get on to 21 Online, and I got to learn how to, I don't know what else to use as examples, but just all kinds of, I got to go take this class. You got to come be here today. All of those things are in the activities phase. I got to learn how to log into the system. I got to learn how to get in the MLS. I got to learn how to fill out a CMA report. All of those things are activities based, and non-productive. Now that you understand what that was from yesterday, these are all the non-productive things that we are comfortable doing. Now, as you look at this bottom line and this learning curve line, think of that line as being your income as well. Now, how much income do you make when you're stuck in the activity space?
Not a lot.
Zero.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, so essentially zero. Now, and you saw that yesterday. If you remember all the things we had written up under there that were under the non-productive, if you did those things all day long, now keep in mind, that's not the same thing as not important, meaning this is a normal phase. And yes, you do have to learn how to get on the MLS and do a search, and you got to learn how to do a CMA. You got to learn how to do all these things. So I'm not saying you don't, but what you don't want to do, which most agents do, is you get stuck in that getting ready to get going phase over and over and over and over and over again. And if you get stuck in that same phase of going over and over and over again, of getting ready to get going, you get stuck in this phase, and you can see how much money you're going to make in this business, which is nothing. So we got to get you out of that phase as quick as we can and into the next phase. The next phase is what we would call the contacts phase. Now, here's the story I'm going to share with you. I started to share a little bit of it yesterday with you guys, but I'm going to give you the rest of the story. When I got my real estate license, in fact, actually, let me back up and I'll give you even a little more. When I decided to go get my real estate license, I was working at a bank, and I decided I wanted to get out of working at the bank, and I wanted to go get my real estate license. I called up my uncle, who was a builder, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about getting my real estate license, and I would be interested in knowing like what your thoughts are on that. He's a builder. He had 4 agents that sat his model homes. Remember, this is over 25 years ago, because it's before I got my license, probably like 26 or 27 years ago. And he said, yeah, at that time, so remember, this is early 1990s. He says, yeah, I've got 4 agents that sit my model homes. I paid 2 of them over $60,000, and I paid the other 2 over $100,000 the year before that. Well, at that time, I was working at a bank, and I was making about, I don't know, $30,000, $35,000 a year, somewhere in that range. So 60,000 sounded great to me at that point. But as we've already talked about, of course, I wanted to make 100,000. So I went and got my real estate license. I called up my uncle and I said, hey, I got my license. I'm ready to get going. When can I start? And he said, well, I've already got 4 agents that sit my model homes. So unfortunately, I can't hire you, because unless one of them leaves, I don't have an opening. So I said, well, what should I do? And he said, you should go talk to this guy by the name of Tom. And he said, I think he's pretty good. His agents seem to follow him around. And so I would recommend you go talk to Tom. So I went and talked to Tom. And Tom, now here's the funny thing. When I went to interview, and maybe you guys did this too, but man, when I went to interview with him, I thought I was like going on a job interview. Like I really felt like I had to go impress him. I needed to have my resume. I needed to look good so that he would want to hire me. What I didn't realize then that I do now is he was on the other end going, okay, what do I got to do to impress him to get for him to want to choose the company that he was with. Well, and not because of he wanted me per se, but just brokerages want real estate agents. And so they're more worried about trying to convince you to go to their company than you should be probably about going there, maybe. But anyway, so I went to this like dressed up, ready to go, wanting to impress him. And I got there and we talked, and inside I'm like really doing my best trying to have him want to hire me. And he says, "Hey, that sounds great. Well, just once you get your license, let me know, and we'll get you going." And so I left there excited, thinking, "Oh, they want to hire me." And so I got my license. I get started with him. I showed up to the office, and the very first day I got there, I was like, "All right, tell me what to do." And he said, "Here's what you need to do. Go create a list of everyone you know, and then come tell me." So I went and sat down, and I got a list. I created all the people that I knew, went to him and said, "Okay, now what?" He said, "All right, now take that list, and then I want you to go call and mail to all of those people I joined real estate card." So I did. Then I went back and said, "Okay, now what?" And I think he got sick of me coming and saying, "Now what should I do? Now what should I do?" Which many of you should do that more than you do, by the way, is you should go to your broker, your manager, and say, "What should I be doing?" Because if you're sitting around doing nothing, go and ask them. But I'm going to give you the answers today, so you hopefully don't need to go say that. But part of why I say that is there are a lot of people who sit around and do nothing and don't get their real estate career going, and then they want to turn around and blame the company or the manager or whoever. Well, then nobody ever told me what to do. Well, hate to break it to you, but you came to a business. Remember on day one, we talked about you're a business owner. As a business owner, this isn't like a regular job where the more you can sit around and do nothing and get paid for it, the better off you are. That's not the way this is going to work. You got to take initiative in this. So go and ask if you're not sure. All right. So I kept going and asking. Well, finally, what he said to me was this, and we talked about this, I think yesterday, but he drew up there on the board for me and basically said, "How many deals do you want to do?" And remember, I told you on Monday, I think it was, that a good place to start is how many transactions do you want to do, is how many contacts you should be making. And again, I don't believe that it really is scientifically works out that way, but it's a good place to start. So he did that, and I would recommend for you, that's where you should start as well, is saying, okay, how many transactions do you want to do? If you put together your business plan, you know that. So now you know how many contacts you should be making. Well, the number that I came up with is, and here's how I did it actually, is essentially the commission that you would make per deal then was $2,000. Well, remember, I had the same number that most everybody had, is I wanted to make 100,000. So if I needed to do 100,000 by doing $2,000 per transaction, I needed to do 50 transactions. Okay, great. So how many contacts do I need to do? 50. So I now am going to start doing 50 contacts. And my manager just said to me, "Okay, go out and knock on doors, get on the phone and make calls and just get your 50 contacts every day." So here's what I did, is I had a lady at the office. Her name was Shirley. Shirley and I would meet every day at the office at about between 9 and 9:30. We would meet up, and then she and I would go into a conference room. So just for you guys that were on Morning Ascent today, so you know that I practice what I am preaching. Shirley and I would go in the conference room and we would role play every day. So I would role play every day. And usually what we would do is I would throw out scenarios to Shirley that I got stumped on the day before and see how she would answer. And then she would do the same thing for me. Well, I did that for about 2 years, that Shirley and I would go and we would meet, we would role play. And then after we were done role playing, she and I would jump in a car and we would drive out to a neighborhood. And this neighborhood that we liked to go and door knock in was a neighborhood that was basically tract houses. They were a bunch of houses that were built in 1954 and 1955. And there's essentially like 2, maybe 3 floor plans for these houses. And we love to go door knock those properties because back then The average sales price for that neighborhood was $80,000. So it was $80,000 to buy one of those houses. Essentially, that's how much it costs to buy a car today, right? It's $80,000. But we would go knock on these doors that were $80,000 houses. And the reason we liked that neighborhood is because if you listed one, it would sell fast because those are essentially the cheapest homes on the market. So she and I would go and door knock until we would get 25 contacts. Once we got our 25 contacts, then we would leave, go back to the office. We would go our separate ways to eat lunch. And when I say we, she was on one side of the road, I was on the other side. We weren't like walking through the door together, but she would be on one side, I would be on the other. And we'd go back to the office, go to lunch, and then we would go into either her office or my office, and we would sit and make phone calls until we got our other 25 contacts. So I would do 50 contacts essentially every day. Now, when I say essentially, there was one day of the week that we always had sales meeting, that we would go to sales meeting. And so I would only get 25 contacts on that day instead of 50. But essentially every day I would get my 50 contacts. Well, now part of when I say to you, you're going to hear people tell you, if you'll make 50 contacts a day, you'll do 50 transactions. Well, I had been in the business about a year and a half. So I told you where I started. Now fast forward a year and a half. For a year and a half, I had been making 50 contacts a day, essentially. I would go out and door knock for 25 and I'd get on the phone for 25. And I would do that pretty much every day. And at the end of a year and a half, I still had not done 50 transactions. So not only had I not done 50 transactions in a year, I had not done 50 transactions in a year and a half. And in fact, looking back on it, I guess if you think about $2,000 per transaction, and I probably made about $35,000. So I had done what, maybe 17 transactions, something like that. Like I hadn't done very many transactions. Well, after about a year and a half, and I can still tell you where this property was. I remember I had a specific property under contract that my wife told me, if that property doesn't close, you got to go get a real job. And so thankfully it closed. And honestly, looking back, it should not have. The title company ended up having to pay out a $25,000 title insurance claim because the escrow officer did some stuff they shouldn't have done to close it, which she didn't do it on my behalf. She just did it. But I look back on it and I'm like, had she not done that, made that mistake, I probably wouldn't be standing here talking to you guys today. So I'm glad she made that error. But here's what happened though, is I went to a training after I had been about a year and a half in the business. And I mentioned to you a little bit about this yesterday, I think it was. But in that training, the guy that I was there listening to, who became a friend and a mentor to me, he pointed out to me this, what I'm showing you here, this activities, contacts, this phase, this journey. And what he said, because I was frustrated. So I'm in this training and I was said, I am doing everything that I have been told to do. And I honestly believe that I had and was doing everything that I had been told to do. Now, remember, part of what I told you is part of what I'm trying to accomplish today is I want to help you shorten this so you don't have to go through what I went through. And I went to this training and I said, I am doing everything that I have been told to do. And so he drew this up on the board and he said, let me show you what your problem is. And I said, okay. And then when he drew it up here and he explained this activities phase, and I was like, I'm not in that phase, which a lot of people that fail out of this business fail because they never get out of the activities phase. You have to get out of the activities phase and fast. Like you're going to be in there for a week or two and that's normal, but get out of it quick because, and in fact, I will a lot of times see agents that are like, well, I got to come up with a good website. And then they'll spend a month working on their website every day, working on their website. Okay, don't do that. That's activities phase. And if you stay there forever, you're never going to make any money. So you got to get out of that and into this contact phase. That's why I say to you, this is a good place to start, is identify how many transactions do you want to do in the next year. And that's how many people you need to talk to every day. That's a good place to start, but here's the problem. So now let's go to this line I have drawn up here. As you look at this line I have drawn up here, during the contacts phase, if this is your income, this line right here, how much money are you making? Yeah, not much, right? Like you look at that, there's a little bit of lift off, but not much. See, that's the problem with the contact phase. And so what the guy did is then he explained to me the next phase in this, which is what we would call the appointments phase. So right before we started class, Tishwan was saying that people who are really smart are bad spellers. And I just spelled appointments really bad. So I guess I'm a really smart person. All right. Appointments. This appointments phase, in this appointments phase, now notice what happens. Look at what happens to your income in the appointments phase.
It goes way up.
It ramps up big time. Notice that. Well, so here's what he did. So this guy was talking to me, and this is what I want you to understand, is yes, you need to start in the activities phase, stay there for 2 or 3 weeks, and then go to the contacts. Be in the contacts phase for as short of a time as you can as well, because here's what he did. Here's what he said to me, is your problem is that you are focused on making contacts. So the first principle we're going to talk about today is focus. So if you want to, if you're taking notes, I would say the first thing you've got to write down that in terms of you generating deals, leads, transactions, the first thing you need to write down is focus. Is what are you focusing on? Because what he told me is, he said, here's the problem. When you go out and prospect, you are focused on making contacts. And so guess what you get? When you go out prospecting, you focus on contacts, guess what you get? Contacts. That's right. Yeah, I'm going to get contacts. Well, so what he said is, they see the next phase in this process is the appointments phase. Notice how the steepest part of this learning curve is the appointments phase. But also notice that the income goes up dramatically during that as well. And so here's what he said. He said, here's your problem. You're focused on making contacts. And so as a result, when you go out and make your phone calls or you go out and knock on doors, you are so worried about making a contact that that's all you get. And so let me show you what I mean. Basically what would happen is this, is I would go out and knock on somebody's door, and when they would open the door, I would say, hi, my name's Russ, I'm with Century 21, and we just listed your neighbor's home over here, and it's listed at this price, and it's got this many bedrooms, and it's got this many bathrooms, and I just was wondering who you know that wants to move into the area. And then they would say, I don't know anybody. And I would say, okay, well, what about you? Have you thought about buying or selling? Nope. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for your time. I'll talk to you later. And then I would go to the next door. Now, here's what I was doing, is I carried around with me a piece of paper and a pen. And then what would happen is, as soon as I knocked on the door, so if I knocked on Melanie's door back here, then, and she answered the door and I ran through that, then I would afterwards, I'd put a tick mark on that piece of paper. There's one contact. I only need 49 more. And I would go on to the next one. And I would knock on the door and they would come to the door and I would say that same thing. We listed your neighbor's house. Here's the price. Here's the beds. Here's the bath. Who do you know? Nobody. Oh, do you want to move? No, we don't want to. Okay. Well, thanks for your time. Tick. There's 2. I only need 48 more. So at the end of every day, what would happen is I would end up with 50 contacts and I would go home feeling like I made my 50 contacts. I did what I was supposed to do. And I didn't have any money, but I did what I was supposed to do. And essentially I had replaced my income from working at the bank, but that was about it. And I don't know about you guys, but I didn't come into this business to just replace my income that I was doing from another job. Because if that's all you want to do, keep doing the other job, because at least you know you're going to get it. This, it's depending on you doing the job in order for you to get the income. Well, what he said to me is, here's what I want you to change. Change your focus when you're prospecting. Don't focus on contacts, instead focus on appointments. And I said, okay. And he said, if you'll do that, it will change your whole career and change your life in real estate. So I said, okay, great, I'm going to do that. Now, here's what he said to me. And I'm not necessarily saying for you to do this part yet, but you want to get to it as fast as you can. And that is this. What he said to me is, so tomorrow, so when I went through this training that I'm talking about, it was a Monday, Tuesday, then we would take a break. we would come back to class on Wednesday, Thursday. Then we would take a 2-week break and we came back on a Friday. So it was a 5-day training, but spread out basically over an entire month. And part of the reason for that was tied to around this. So we're having this conversation on the Tuesday afternoon, and he says, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to commit to that starting tomorrow, so the next day, Wednesday, is you're going to prospect until you get an appointment. So however many contacts it takes for you to get an appointment is what you're going to do. You are going to prospect until you get an appointment. Once you get an appointment, you're done. So that was the other side of it, is he said, here's the thing. As soon as you set your appointment, you're done for the day. Go home, if you have work to do, do that, the end time work stuff that we talked about, the non-productive stuff, go ahead and do it. But as soon as you're done with that, go home. Remember yesterday when I was talking about the time management stuff and how I was keeping track of my time? And I said to you, I had gone over to the title company to order a preliminary title report. And I sat and talked to the guy for 2 hours. See, that's part of where he was like, don't do that. Go do your work and then go home. Go do what you want to do. If what it is you want to do is go visit with somebody for 2 hours, then do it. But don't do it and pretend you think you're working. So I said, okay. Now, he was not sure that I understood what he was really saying, which he was correct, actually, is because he said to me, here's what that means. Tomorrow morning, you're going to get up and start prospecting. You don't stop until you get an appointment. And I was like, yeah, no, I get it. And he said, okay, but I want to make sure you really understand. You're not going to stop prospecting until you get an appointment. And I was like, yeah, no, I get it. And he said, I just want to make sure you get it. You're going to go home tonight and tell your wife, I am not coming home tomorrow if I don't set an appointment. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, you mean like I really have to get an appointment? And he said, yeah, you don't get to go home if you don't set an appointment. This isn't like well, do your best, and if you don't get one, then you can go home. No, don't go home. And I was like, oh, well, actually, I don't know if I want to commit to that. Now, the reason I wasn't sure I wanted to commit to it is because, remember, I had already been doing 50 contacts and not getting very many appointments. So for me, stopping and thinking about it, I was like, hold on. What you're saying, though, then is that I might have to do 100 contacts to get an appointment. And he said, you're going to do as many as it takes, whatever it takes to get an appointment. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to commit to that. And he said, look, it's just for 1 week, because he was asking me to commit to it. So from that Tuesday, so the Wednesday, from the Wednesday until the next Tuesday, because we would have gone back to class again on Wednesday. So he said, you're only committing to do it for 1 week. Like, it's the worst case scenario, you just don't get to go home for a week if you don't get an appointment. And I was like, oh. And then he could tell I was nervous about it. So he said, you can do this. And I promise you, it is not going to be as hard as you think it's going to be. So I said, okay, I will do it. So I committed to doing it. I said, I will not go home tomorrow until I set an appointment. Now, here's what happened. Now, actually, let me back up and ask you guys a question. So I haven't let many of the Zoom people respond. So I'm going to ask you guys. If I said that to you, if I said to you, you cannot go home tomorrow until you set an appointment, what would you do differently tomorrow than you have been doing in your real estate career? So somebody on Zoom first.
Be a lot more aggressive.
Okay,
Yeah.
say more about that, Andrew.
Essentially, like, I feel like mainly just because I'm newer to the industry, sometimes when people give me objections, I'm not quite sure how to overcome them quite yet. I just don't have enough experience in that department of just going through the steps. So sometimes I just don't fight enough and don't ask enough questions or follow-up questions to try and pursue it more. And I just kind of take the no when I shouldn't.
Okay,
if I had to get an appointment before I was allowed to go home, especially in this heat wave, I'd be a lot more aggressive.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Okay, just one.
Definitely changed my mindset. Do it or die. It's that type of
Yeah, burn the
mindset,
boats.
and then just really be aggressive, like they said.
Okay, good. Anyone else?
I'd probably change my phrasing while talking to them to gear it towards appointments more than
Good.
just reading them.
Good. I love it. And then Sunshine said, don't talk about it, be about it. Get out of my own way. Good. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. Here's the thing. and what you guys said is right on. You're going to be a little more aggressive, and you got to change your approach. See, that's what I found is I changed my approach, which would include this being more aggressive. So now let me show you what it looked like. So somebody online, who's willing to role play with me? Somebody on Zoom.
I will, Russ.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I was about to just say, we got to get some of these people who are not saying anything involved, but we'll get them on the next one. All right. So here we go, Dan. So let me show you what I mean by that. See, now remember, I already showed you what I was saying before. So now don't just roll over, Dan. Like, don't be easygoing on me, okay? So here's what's going to happen. So I'm going to knock on the door. I'm going to do it. And I want you to tell me no 2 or 3 times before you say yes, okay?
All right, no problem.
Okay, so here we go. Knock, knock.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Russ. I'm with Century 21, and we just listed your neighbor's home over here, the Phillips. Do you know them?
Yeah, I do, Russ.
You do? Okay, great. Well, hey, the reason I'm here knocking on your door is they have asked me to go see what I can do to find a buyer for their home. And one of the things that I have found is a lot of times the neighbors are the best source of finding someone who would potentially want to buy in the area. So I just wanted to see who you know that's interested in buying or selling real estate.
You know what, Russ? I don't know anybody. I'm probably not the neighbor to talk to.
So you're probably not the one to talk. Well, which of the neighbors should I talk to then?
I really don't know. I mean, left or right, anybody's better than me.
Anybody better? Okay, well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate you telling me the truth on that. Hey, so let me ask you, though, what about you? When do you plan on selling your home?
Oh, I'm not sure that I ever plan on selling it. To be honest, I've never thought about it.
So you never even thought about it, and no plans to do it in the near future then?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, hey, awesome. Hey, well, I appreciate you taking the time and sharing that with me. Let me ask you real quick, though, before I let you go, how are you using real estate to plan for your financial future?
Well, to be honest, I really haven't even considered that.
Haven't considered. Okay. So, but could you see the value though of owning an investment property and having some passive income coming into you from that?
I mean, if it wasn't costing me anything, yeah, sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, not only not costing you anything, but hopefully the idea is you're making money from it, not just not costing you.
Right. Well, how often does that happen?
That you're able to buy a property and make money off of it?
Yeah, like right away.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I wouldn't recommend buying the property if you can't do that.
All right.
So here's what we ought to do is let's get together and spend maybe 20 or 30 minutes so I can walk you through the process and help you understand. And then let's see if it makes sense for you to do. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, then, you're out 15, 20 minutes. So what works better for you, afternoons or evenings?
Well, I have a newborn, so afternoons might be a little bit easier, but
Okay.
It's tough because I got to work too. So
Sure, totally makes sense. So would 2 or 3 be better for you?
well, I could probably do 2. I could probably squeeze in around a lunch if you want to try to do something like that.
Okay, so at lunchtime. Okay, perfect. Let's do it around lunchtime then.
All right.
All right, so now let me ask you guys, what changed?
You're a lot more aggressive, and you did change your phrasing. So it was geared more towards fixing what they had objections to and getting that appointment made.
Good. Yeah. So notice that. See, in the past, what I would have done is when I knocked on Dan's door and he came to the door and said, I'm not the person to talk to, I would have said, well, who is the person to talk to then? And then he would have said, I don't know, anybody but me. Okay. All right. Well, hey, thanks for your time. Now, why would have I been okay with that before? Is because all I was looking for was to do these tick marks of here's my contacts for the day. And if I could get to 50, I was good. And I could go home and feel like I worked really hard. But now all of a sudden, remember, this guy said to me, you've got to set an appointment. And once you set an appointment, you can be done. But until you do, you got to keep going. See, once you know that, like for me, if I knock on Dan's door and I can get an appointment, then I'm done for the day. I don't have to prospect anymore. I'm going for that appointment because now I don't have to do anymore. I can stop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Once you make the appointment, do you want them to come to the office for the appointment, or do you go to them?
Good question. So hopefully you guys heard that. Do I want them to come to the office or go to them? Ideally, the ideal scenario would be that they come to the office. But not always is that going to play out. And so for me, if I can't get them to agree to come to the office, then I'll go to them. Now, the other thing that we didn't do in this, which I don't want to spend a lot of time on right now, but was especially this scenario of an investment property kind of a thing, where I would have left it with him is when I said, hey, what works best, afternoons or evenings? Now, I was role-playing it as if I was at his door. If I'm at his door, it's very likely that he says, well, I got time right now. Why don't you come in and just talk to me right now? I'm always going to approach it this way. Hey, because remember, I told him I was knocking on the door for his neighbor. I'm going to always say, I don't have time right now because I'm out working for your neighbor right now. So I'm always going to say, I don't have time to do it right now because I'm out working for your neighbor, but let's set an appointment for later on. Or I potentially would have said, I'm going to be doing this for another hour and then I could come back in an hour if that works for you. But I don't ever want to do it right then. And here's the thinking for that. So it's twofold. One is, especially for the females in the class, is it gives you like that little bit of protection as well of being able to let somebody else know, hey, I'm going on this appointment, or get somebody to come with you or whatever. Like, I just don't necessarily want you walking into a stranger's house right now, is part of it. The other part of it is I want to be able to take the chance to get them to pre-qualify them. Now, remember, I said pre-qualifying before is not just with the lender, but it's figuring out motivation and things. So part of what I'm going to do on this one, though, I'm talking about pre-qualifying with the lender because it was around an investment property. I would want to make sure that he would be able to get a loan and those type of things first. So before leaving Dan's door, I would have said, okay, hey, so let me do this real quick. I'm still going to go do this other stuff. We're going to come back tomorrow at noon or whatever. I'm going to have my lender give you a call and talk to you about the financing options and things that are available so that we know what we're dealing with when I get there. That way I'm not, because if he can't qualify, his credit's bad or just whatever, can't qualify, I don't want to go back and make that go on the appointment. But here's the secret. Now, I want to make sure you guys got this. What I was committing to do was of setting an appointment. It wasn't about keeping an appointment. I just had to set an appointment every day that I worked. So that's, in that scenario, I set the appointment. So now because I set the appointment, I could have at that point been done prospecting. And that's what changed. Now let me tell you what happened. So let me finish I left out one other piece. Let me ask you guys this question before I tell you the answer. If I said to you, you can't go home tomorrow until you set an appointment, what time would you start working tomorrow?
5 a.m.
6:30.
Yeah, notice that. So remember I told you with Shirley and I, we would meet at the office usually between 9 and 9:30. Well, now this was Tuesday, I'm in a class. Shirley is planning on meeting me at the office between 9 and 9:30. Well, similar to what you guys just said, I was like, no, I'm not showing up at the office at 9 or 9:30. So I went home that Tuesday night and I told my wife, hey, for the next week, I'm not coming home until I set an appointment. And she said to me, well, we've got such and such tomorrow night, and so you better get your appointment because you got to be home at that particular time. Okay. So similar to what we talked about. Next morning, man, I was up early. I was at the office by 7:30 because I wanted to have, and I already told you this yesterday, I wanted to pull all the for sale by owners. I wanted all the expired listings. I wanted to have phone numbers lined up. Now, the other thing, and you guys may, or depending on how long you've been in the business, you may or may not understand this next piece, meaning you might not think of it, is, but if I said to you, hey, you got to make an appointment tomorrow, who are the people that you would think you would probably call first?
Friends and family.
Okay, what was that, Andrew?
People I know.
Contact like your SOI, your friends and family.
Okay. Not a bad idea. For sale by owners, not a bad idea. For me, where I went to is every lead that I had. Any leads, people who had told me in the past, we've thought about it. That's the first place I started because I'm like, they're the ones who were most likely to say yes to me. So I went to the office, I got the for sale by owners, I got the expireds, and then I grabbed all of my leads that I had on sticky notes or whatever laying around. And I started calling those people, hey, you know what we ought to do? Let's get together and sit down and talk about what it is you want to accomplish. Like for me, that's what I did. So I get the office at 8 a.m., man, I was on the phone, calling. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. I started calling through all these leads that I had first. And I set an appointment before 9:15, before Shirley even showed up to the office. Now, the other piece that I left out on this, it took me typically, back then, it would take me, I could get about 10 contacts an hour. So it would take me about 4 hours of prospecting, 5 hours of prospecting to get 50 contacts. Well, the other thing that this guy had told me is if you will commit to setting an appointment, you will prospect half as much as you have been in this area. See that? Now, this is where this becomes counterintuitive. We talked about that yesterday. You would think setting an appointment would take more contacts than getting 50. At least I naturally thought that way because in my mind, I was thinking of it from the standpoint of I was doing 50 contacts and not getting an appointment every day. So in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to probably have to do more than that to get an appointment every day. But it's actually counterintuitive. When you move into this appointment space, it takes you half as long to set an appointment as it did when you were focused on contacts. So Andrew, you got your hand raised on here. I don't know if that's an accident. Did you have
Yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt. I just had a quick question. So
Yeah,
you're
go
saying you get in, you start like early, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Is there a time where it's like, it's not cool to call someone that early? Like some people aren't even getting up that time. Do you send more emails? Was there a game plan for that?
Yeah, great question. So on that, actually, as far as like telemarketing laws, 8 a.m. is the soonest you can start making calls. Now, let me tell you though, so I'm going to give you another scenario here, but keep in mind the law says 8 a.m. So because the law says that way, I am teaching you and telling you, you should follow the law. Now, the agents who prospect and list a lot of for sale by owners and expireds, specifically expired listings, usually will start making their phone calls as early as 6:45 a.m. The law says 8 o'clock.
And that doesn't bother people? People don't
What's
like
that?
get offended, or people don't get offended or upset if like someone's blowing them up at 6:45, 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah.
They just
Some
don't care. They're just aggressive. I'm gonna not take a no for status.
It's a waste of time though.
Russ, I have a question in regards to that for sale by owner situation.
Okay,
What
go
if
ahead.
somebody is on a do not call list? How are you going to contact the for sale by owner in a situation like we're in now with COVID, where knocking on the door even is kind of up in the air? Are you just going to reach out to them by mail or try to find their
Yeah, good
email? Or
question.
what?
So the answer is kind of going to be the same. If they're on the do not call list and you do not have a buyer for their home, you should not be calling them. Now,
Right.
similar to what I just said about the law on calling at 8 a.m. though, there are a lot of agents who don't care if it says do not call, they call anyway. And so yes, what Tishwan said is you run the risk of people that are going to get mad at you, for sure. And you run the risk that somebody turns you in and you have to pay a fine. But there are a lot of agents who look at it and go, until I get that fine, I'm going to go take the money that I make along the way. And some of them even look at it as it's a cost of doing business. I am not recommending that.
Because the fine is like $500, right?
No, it's like
Something
11,000.
that. Oh, wow.
Okay.
Not worth it. It's not worth it.
I don't know if it's, from the company standpoint, I have to tell you, follow the laws. But I know there are a lot of agents that go $11,000, but if I make 100,000 off of making these calls, I'll pay the 11. So
Okay.
follow the law. So to answer your question, I would still go knock on their door. I don't care if it's COVID. I'd knock on the door and back off. And if they yell at you, they yell at you. You're going to have part of being in real estate, people are going to yell at you. Even after COVID's over, you go knock on somebody's door, they're going to yell at you because it might say no soliciting. And they're going to go, hey, can't you read? So just be prepared you got to have a little bit of a thick skin. So somebody
I
has.
was just gonna bring up the notes. I did attempt the door knocking thing a few times, but I'm finding that most doors has a no soliciting sign, and I would back off and go, and then it's like almost half the neighborhood had no soliciting signs on it. So.
Yeah, so as far as no soliciting goes, let me tell you how. For me, it just depended on how I felt that day. If I was kind of in a, hey, I'm in a good mood and I don't really care, you're not going to bring me down, I would knock on the no soliciting doors. And very few times did people yell at me. Occasionally would, and usually they would say something like, can't you read? And I would say one of two things at that point. Now, you guys that are in California won't get this joke that I'm going to make, so I don't expect you guys to laugh. But I would usually say, well, actually, I graduated from Cypress High School, and so no, I can't read, basically. And so that's one of the responses I would usually make, which would usually get a laugh out of the people. But typically, here's the response that I would do. And so for real, I would actually approach it this way, for real, is I would walk up to the door like this, head down, so that I was not looking at the door until I got to the door. As soon as I got to the door, I'd look up and knock, then I would notice the no soliciting. So my point being, I would intentionally try not to see a no soliciting sign until after I knocked on the door. That way, when I knocked on the door and they came and said, can you not read? I would say, I'm totally sorry, I didn't notice it till after I knocked. And honestly, when I would do that, and for real, I would try not to notice. When I would knock on the door and they would come and I'd say, I didn't notice it until after I had knocked and I didn't want to walk away. They'd go, okay. They were usually fine.
So I also noticed that most people now have the camera.
Yep.
And of course I'll see them, but I'll knock on the doors anyways, but they're not answering the doors at all. They see you in the camera.
They see you, yeah. So here's my thought on those is turn those into basically even though you're at their door and you're hitting their Ring doorbell or whatever, I treat it like even though I'm at their door, I treat it as if it's a phone call because they can see you, you can't see them. And essentially that's what it becomes is you're knocking on doors, but it's a phone call instead. And like you say, a lot of times they don't answer. Well, then think of it as start to talk. If you think they're listening to you, just talk, which I'll say more about that because there's another piece we're going to talk about first that I'll show you about how you could get them to then be willing to talk to you. Okay? All right, let's see. Jordan's asking, is there any rule set by the board that says not to knock doors while COVID is active? I don't believe so, but if there is, hey, I the other day realized I have probably had 4 or 5 people knock on my door recently, the solar guys, whatever. So, and what I noticed, the most recent one that I had, the guy just knocked on it and backed off so that he was like down the stairs and far enough away. Like, honestly, as long as you're further away, I think you're probably fine. And just know, you're going to have people who are like, I can't believe you'd come knock on my door. But that same person would figure out some other reason to say it if COVID wasn't going on. So you just got to decide how you want to do it and how you want to approach it. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Why would you stop at one appointment? Is it just because it takes so long, or is it just because you want to end on a high, or what?
Oh, good question. So just making sure you guys heard him. He said, why would I stop after one appointment? Because I'm lazy.
Okay.
So, I mean, well, and here's the truth actually for me. Prior to this, when I was in this contacts phase, like I wasn't getting one appointment a day. So for me to get one appointment a day initially, I was like, that's great. And here's the other thing I will tell you is, and if you can do more, absolutely. Like I know a lot of agents who are like, I got to set 3. In fact, I think Brian Burnett that's making 1.6 million, I think his objective is 2 appointments a day, to set 2 a day. So Here's what I will tell you. I got to where I was making over $250,000 a year by setting one appointment a day. So for me, when I said I was lazy, probably complacent is a better word, is if you want to go to the next level, then yeah, you raise that. Now, which actually is a good segue to the last phase of this is what's called the transactions phase. If you want to get to that phase, which is essentially where a Brian Burnett is, where a Tina Hare is in California, is in this transactions phase. So let me make sure you guys understand. In the activities phase, you're just doing non-productive things. Contacts phase, you're making a certain number of contacts. Appointments phase, you are setting, keyword, setting a certain number of appointments. In the transactions phase, which the transactions phase is when you want to be like the top agent in the company or, you know, number one or two, you keep one appointment every day. So if you had to keep an appointment every day, meaning you had to actually go on an appointment before you could go home, how many appointments do you think you need to set every day in order to do that?
At least 2.
Yeah, at least 2, because probably you look at it, 50% are probably going to fall apart. So you need at least 2, if not 3, set every day, because half are either you're going to cancel or they will. Because you're going to cancel because when you pre-qualify them, it doesn't work or whatever. So yeah, the next phase is the transaction phase. This is when you're making over $500,000 a year. So if you want to make over $500,000 a year, you got to get to the keep an appointment every day phase. And for me, I was just complacent. I got to the appointments phase and was like, I'm making a good income. I'm happy. And I stayed there. All right. Any other questions before we go to the next piece of this? All right. I'm going to erase this then. So hopefully you got it. This is where typically, let me ask you guys, you guys that are on Zoom, can you see the bigger screen? Like if I use the whole board, can you see it well enough, or do you have to switch to my other view to really see what I'm writing?
I can't see what you're writing.
Yeah, I have to pin it on your close-up video
Okay.
to.
All right, I'll keep doing that then. No worries.
Yeah, the bigger screen is a little blurry.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, so next piece of this then. So now I'm going to so essentially what's going to happen is this morning's stuff is going to be more of like setting the foundation for what we're going to do later on today. So here's the next piece of this. The next step of this is, and this will tie into what we talked about yesterday. So I'm writing up on the board, which almost seems like that marker's kind of getting worn out. Let me see if this one comes through a little better. All right. When you prospect, I don't know if that's any better, but when you prospect, you want to be prospecting on parallel tracks. So the first key thing that I'm hoping you guys got out of what we talked about, which is what I asked you to write down, is your focus has to be on setting appointments. When you're prospecting, you've got to be focused on setting appointments. So now with that in mind, when you prospect, you're looking for 2 things at the same time. So when you prospect, you want to be prospecting on 2 parallel tracks, okay? So when I say you need to be prospecting on 2 parallel tracks, what I mean is this. You should be looking for now business when you're prospecting, but at the same time, you want to be looking for future business. And let me show you what I mean. How many of you plan on, and you can either unmute, throw it in the chat box, you guys that are here with me, raise your hand. How many of you plan on being in business in real estate a year from now?
I do.
I do.
Maybe the way I should say it is, does anybody not plan on being in real estate a year from now? I thought somebody was thinking about it when I heard some noise there. I was like, all right, somebody's going to, I've never had anybody say no yet. I have had one person say, I'm not sure, but I haven't had anybody say I'm not yet. So good. If you plan on being in real estate a year from now, wouldn't it make sense that while I'm prospecting today to look for now business, that if I come across somebody who wants to do some transactions in the next year, that I would want to capture them as well? Jordan said he's got to be making his 6 figures in 9 months. If not, then you're out of here, right? Hey, it'll work, Jordan. If you'll do what I taught you yesterday, it'll work. All right. So here's the thing. When we talk about now business, what I'm talking about is setting appointments. So this is how I'm tying this together. The future business is going to be leads. So think of it this way. While you're prospecting, you have a primary objective and a secondary objective. Your primary objective in prospecting is to set appointments. That's what your primary objective is. I'm going to get an appointment. In the event that I can't get an appointment, then I want to capture the person as a lead. So back to when I did that little role play with Dan. In the event that I couldn't have set an appointment with him, I would have gone to the script that we used yesterday, which I would have said, well, hey, Dan, I have a select group of people that I stay in touch with. I would like to add you to that list. And what it means is that I'll just stay in touch with you about real estate and provide you with some information to keep you up to speed. Is that going to be okay? And he would have said, yep, that's fine. And then I said, great, let me get your information, and I would add. So that's what I mean by prospecting on 2 parallel tracks. Now, the reason that I want to be prospecting on 2 parallel tracks is because of this. So the next piece that I'm going to go, to of explaining to you guys that it's crucial that you understand is this. I'm going to explain to you now the buyer cycle and the seller cycle. Okay. So, and this is a 3-phased approach. Now, how I learned this process was about 20 years ago when I bought the home that I live in now is when I learned this process that I'm going to show you next. Okay. So keeping in mind, while you're prospecting, you're looking on parallel tracks. I'm looking for now business, but I'm also looking for future business at the same time. Well, with that being the case, what you guys need to understand, and actually this is actually even, so Jordan, where you brought up the 6 figures in 9 months thing, what I'm about to show you now is why when you are working your sphere of influence, what I'm going to give to you now is also the reason it's going to take 6 to 9 months for you to start to have that really pay off the way that we talked about is because of this. Because this is the process that anybody is going to go through before they buy or sell a home, okay? So the first thing that happens is this, percolation. When you hear the word percolation or percolate, what do you think of?
Water.
Soil.
Okay, so I've heard coffee pot, water, and soil. Good. All of those are great. And so typically, what is percolating? What does that mean? Like, explain to me percolation. If I didn't know what the word meant, what is percolation?
It's like to aerate, right?
Say that again.
To aerate, like to provide air into something or to give it oxygen or
Okay.
I don't know.
Cool.
It's like a steady seeping or dripping into either soil or walls or anything. Just like
Good. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's it.
Okay, good. Yeah, right on. Good. Now, so think of it as that in terms of real estate, before somebody buys or sells, they are going to go through a process called percolation is the first thing that's going to happen. Now, let me explain percolation to you. So I already explained to you that I made the commitment that for a week, I would not go home until I set an appointment. Well, what ended up happening is every single day I got my appointment before noon. So I had an appointment by noon every single day, which essentially means that I could then be done working and go home at about noon every day, which we actually have an agent in this office who works very similar to that. Meaning like he is here at this office, he is probably one of, if not the most consistent agents that I know of at this office. He is here every morning. He shows up at the same time. He gets on and makes his calls until noon. And then at noon, I see him walking out of the office and leaving for the day. And then he'll go on whatever appointments and stuff. And he makes a good income. I mean, he's not in that $500,000 to $600,000, but he's between $100,000 and $200,000 every year. And essentially, he's done working by noon every day. Now, when I say that, that's not totally true because he'll go on appointments later in the day and stuff. But he leaves the office at noon. He doesn't sit around and talk to other agents. And in fact, when I see him, it's usually a short conversation because he's on his way out. He just doesn't sit and talk. So I was essentially done by noon every single day. Well, my business, after that 2-week period, I was like, this works. Like I was getting more appointments than I had ever gotten. So I was like, this works. This is my mission. So it became for me, this is what you do. You don't quit working until you get an appointment. And I would do that every day. I would work until I got an appointment. Well, as a result of that, my business took off. And I told you guys that he had said I would prospect half as much if I was setting an appointment. The other thing I didn't tell you that he told me is you will double your income as a result of that as well. Well, so what happened then is I started doing that where I would just prospect every day till I set an appointment. And I would typically get my appointment by noon every day. I would get my appointment and then I would do whatever I needed to do and I'd be done for the day. Well, a year later from that, I had more than doubled my income. And then the year after that, I doubled my income again. And the year after that, I didn't quite double it, but I almost doubled it again off of doing nothing but setting one appointment a day. Well, now let me relate that to this. Part of what I did, and I told you guys this already as well, but is I worked the neighborhood that I lived in. I went and got to know all the neighbors. I would go around and talk to the neighbors and let them know I'm a real estate agent. And if you're thinking of selling or whatever, you know of anybody, let me know. Well, that house that I lived in at that time was a starter home. In fact, my uncle, that when I got my real estate license, I went to him. He had actually built this house for me before I got into real estate. And so all of the people that were in this neighborhood had all bought starter homes that were then now finishing college and getting better jobs and transferring or whatever. So I noticed a lot of turnover in the neighborhood. So being that I had gotten my real estate license, I had gone out and got to know all the people. And so when they were moving, a lot of times they would end up using me to sell their house. Well, a friend of mine lived in the neighborhood that I had gone to high school with. And we didn't plan it this way. Like we were friends in high school. Didn't like hang out a lot, but we were friends. And I one day saw him like walking around and I was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I live over in, a couple streets over or something. And I was like, what? And so he and I talked and became better friends as a result of that. And he and I were talking one day and he's like, man, it seems like everybody that in the neighborhood that sells their house ends up using you. And I was like, yeah, it's been great. And he said, so business is good. Yeah, it's really good. Well, he said, so when are you going to move? And I was like, I'm not planning to move. Like in my mind, it caught me off guard because I was like, why would I ever move when most of the business I was doing was coming out of that neighborhood? So I was like, I'm not planning on moving. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, this is where this starts to tie in. Not long after he asked me that question, I'm in my car and I was driving from my house to the office, to my real estate office. And as I was driving there, now you guys in California will not, you'll think I'm dumb with what I'm saying, but like for Utah at that time, I was like in rush hour traffic, which for me at that point, what that meant is like I had to sit at a stoplight like 2 or 3 times to get through the stoplight so that I could then get to work. Well, so I'm sitting there in this traffic. Yeah, I know. I was going to say, I knew I could get you guys to laugh at that one, right? Hey, I got to tell you, since COVID hit, I miss being in California. So I miss the traffic. Is it back to, do you guys have a ton of traffic or is still not many people on the road?
It's starting to come back slowly.
It's coming back a little bit up off the 5, like in the Santa Clarita area, but not nearly as bad as it was.
Still not where it was. About the same here in Utah, actually. Believe it or not, we only have the one freeway, and that one actually was gotten pretty busy as well, but it's not too bad. Although the other day driving home, I was like, this feels like old days traffic right now. But anyway, back to my story. So I'm driving and I'm sitting there waiting, for the light 2 or 3 times. And while I'm sitting there waiting for that, I have this thought. If I ever were to move, now you guys in California, this won't mean anything, but you guys that are here in Utah will get it. So I lived west of Bangerter Highway. And I thought, if I ever move, I'm going to make sure I live east of Bangerter Highway, because once I would get past that traffic light on Bangerter Highway, it would free up and I would just drive smoothly to work. Now, I had that thought, if I ever move, it'll be east of Bangerter Highway. That's percolation. Now, I didn't understand this when this happened. I got trained on this actually, I got trained on this right before I bought the home I'm in now. But so within about a year of me having this thought of percolate, or of if I ever moved, is when I got trained in this. That's why it sticks out to me. So I had this thought of, if I ever move, this is where I would move to. I didn't know it at the time, but I know now percolation started. That is, so percolation is, it's going on under the surface. Think of it that way. And I like the way Savannah said it, is it's seeping through. And where it's seeping through is from the conscious to the unconscious, or vice versa. It's going one direction to the other. But percolation is, it's happening under the surface and you're not really aware of what's going on with it. Is meaning if I wasn't an agent and you had come and knocked on my door and you had said to me, hey Russ, when do you plan on moving? I would have said, I'm never moving. So I would, and in my mind, I wasn't lying to you. If you came and knocked on my door or called me on the phone, I would have said to you, I'm never moving. But here's what I'll tell you. Within a year of my friend asking me, when are you gonna move? I moved. Even though I told him no plans of moving. And looking back now, I understand that what happened is, honestly, I think he started me on this process.
Yeah, it was a trigger.
Yeah, or planting a seed is the way I like to think of it, Dan, is to some extent, he planted a seed in me that then took root. And I want to be clear, not every time that you plant a seed is it going to take root and grow. But keep in mind, to some extent, you knocking on someone's door and asking them when they plan on moving might plant the seed that then causes them to move. Now, as I said, not every seed is going to take root, but you don't know which ones are and which ones are not going to. So him asking me, when are you going to move, started me on a process that actually within a year I moved. And so here's what that process looked like. Is what happened is, not long after that, after I had the thought of, if I ever move, this is what it would be. Well, not long after that, I'm driving to somewhere and I go past this neighborhood that is being built, and I look off to the side and I'm like, oh, wow, they're taking that farmer's field and going to turn it into houses. And so that was the extent of my thought. Percolation. I noticed this house is being built. Well, after a month or two of that, I'm noticing, hey, they're building some houses in there and they've got the streets in. So I drive through the street. I ought to take some pictures just so that as I'm telling the story, I could show you like where it was at and stuff. But I'm driving along down the street and I decide to drive through the neighborhood. Well, as I drive through the neighborhood, I notice, let me just kind of, I'll draw it for you here. So here's kind of the road, the main road I was driving on is, right here. Here's my car here. I'm driving on, and I notice as I go through this stoplight right here that this whole thing is going to be being built. And so I drive down after they put a road in that goes through right here. And I notice as I drive down this road, there's this park here. Now I'll come back to this story tomorrow as we get into needs analysis. But I noticed this park right here that's got a swimming pool here, a bunch of grassy area here, basketball and tennis courts here, kids play area thing here. And I'm like, wow, like this is a nice neighborhood and some nice houses. Well, they're building a model home that was right here. And I noticed that. And then I just drove off this road, went down here, and I continued on and I went to work. Percolation is still going on. So the next time I'm driving in the car with my wife and we drive past on this road, I point out to her, hey, did you notice this neighborhood they're building there? And she says, no. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's really cool. Like it's going to have a park where they've got a pool and these basketball courts. And I mean, it just looks like a really nice neighborhood and looks like some nice houses too. That's the extent of our conversation. Percolation is still going on. Well, they get this model home built and I drive through. So on my way to work every day, it became pretty common for me to just drive through there. Just because I just wanted to keep an eye on what was going on. You know, I need to know the inventory. That's how I'm justifying it in my mind. But percolation is really what was going on. So they get the model home finished and built. The next phase in this process is what you would call information gathering. So the second phase in this is information gathering. Guess what happens during information gathering? Any guesses?
They start to get excited.
Okay, good.
They start acting on the thought of what do I want and stuff, and actively going out looking for it.
So they start to do what?
Plan.
Yeah, good. They start to gather information. That's why it's such a technical term. In information gathering, guess what they're doing? Gathering information.
Going on Google and doing their own searches because they're curious.
Good, perfect. That's right. See what? To some extent, even during percolation, they're going to go on and do some searching. But as soon as they actually start to really like gather information. So what happened is they get the model home built. I notice it one day. The next time my wife and I are driving down that road, I say, hey, that model home is built. We ought to go just stop in and take a look at it. So we pull down in here, we stop, we walk in. When we walked in to the model home and the agent said, can I help you? What do you think we said?
But we're just looking.
Yep. Actually, what I really said is, I'm a real estate agent, here's my card. But ultimately what I said was, we're just looking. Now, when you hold an open house or somebody calls you about a house, guess what they're going to say?
They're just looking.
Yep. So don't be surprised when you hear we're just looking. Now, hopefully you're starting to understand why. Now, let me explain something. I've got a line drawn here between percolation and information gathering, but it's not, it is obscure, meaning it's not like somebody wakes up one morning and goes, oh, I'm in information gathering. The day we went and looked at the model home, when we walked in there, I truly didn't think we were going to move. My wife didn't think we were going to move. We were just coming in to check it out. So when we said we're just looking, we really actually believed that's all we were doing, is we were just going in just to take a look at the model home because the houses looked nice and we just wanted to check them out. We truly believed that. But I want you guys to understand what's going on is we were moving at that point from percolation to information gathering and we still didn't know it. Meaning, if you would have come and knocked on my door and said to me, when are you going to move? I would have said to you, never. I'm making a ton of money off of the neighborhood that I live in. I'm not moving. I truly didn't think I was going to move, even though now I'm early on in this information gathering phase. So when you come across people, open house, internet lead, I don't care what it is, just calling people. They're going to tell you stuff that we were just curious. They're not lying. In their mind, they believe that's what's going on. When they say to you, we don't ever plan on moving, you need to understand that they believe that's true. But you need to understand they're either in percolation or information gathering. That's why now, remember, I said we want to prospect on 2 parallel tracks for now and in the future. This is what I'm talking about, is the reason you want to capture somebody to be, hey, well, I just stay in touch with a select group of people. The reason I want to do that is because I understand this percolation and information gathering scenario, and that people are going to progress through that until they get to the last phase, which is active. Now, here's the thing. This active phase lasts about 45 days. Now, this is going to vary up and down a little bit, but on average, it's 45 days. And here's the problem, though. when we go out prospecting, what most agents are looking for is this, the active. That's what we're trying to capture up here. But here's the thing. What do you think, in addition to looking at properties, when we talk about information gathering, outside of actually like getting on looking at houses, trying to gather information about houses, what other information do you think they're gathering? Or let me rephrase that. What decisions do you think they're making during this information gathering and percolation phase that's not about the house?
Maybe like the neighborhood, schooling districts, stuff like that.
Okay, good. What else?
Interest rates.
Okay, good. What else? How about who they're going to use as an agent? Like part of what goes on during information gathering is they're just, so when they talk to somebody, they walk into an open house or somebody calls them on the phone, they're making decisions throughout this part of it of like, if we were to buy, we would use somebody like that person. So keep in mind that part of what's going on with that. Now, the reason that becomes important is because well, actually, before I say that, let me ask you this. If I were to label this as phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, so you guys that are online, throw it in the chat box. I want you to commit to, and everybody gets to play. So I want to make sure everybody participates. So you guys that are in the room, you get to hold up a number of fingers. Which group do you think is the hardest to set an appointment with? Phase 1, which is percolation, phase 2, which is information gathering, or phase 3, which is active? Who's the hardest one to get an appointment with? So give me fingers. Not the middle one finger though. So, okay. Okay, so I have inside the room here, I've got 2 people that have said 1. And I've got 1 that said phase 3 online, so you guys can know what I'm seeing. We've got 1, okay, I'm just gonna not say names or anything, but here's what people are saying. 1, 1, 1, phase 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1. The majority of the people are saying 1. Now why? You guys that said phase 1, tell me why you think phase 1 is the hardest.
Because at that point, they've never, like you were saying, you had never even thought about moving yet. So at that point, it's a definite no. You haven't even thought about it. It's never even entered your mind. So it's like at that point, that person's probably more closed off than someone who might be actually interested in gathering information or is actively looking to buy a home.
Okay, good. Anybody else that said phase 1?
As a new agent, we're not as skilled to get that phase 1 for them to make that decision. So for someone who is very skilled, it might be really easy for them.
Okay, cool. Anybody else from phase 1 have a reason you think that's different? If you have a reason that you think is different. All right, Jordan said, because they aren't interested, they don't have a reason to gather information. Okay, good, I like it. Any other thoughts? All right, did anybody say phase 2? Yeah, we did, Dan did. All right, Dan, you're the only one that said phase 2, so I got to pick on you directly, I guess. Why do you think phase 2 is the hardest?
Because that I picked phase 2 because I think during the information gathering phase like that, your competition amongst other realtors is going to be the highest at that point.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Okay, now, so the people who said phase 3, give me some feedback. Why do you think phase 3 is the hardest? So, Philip?
I think it's the hardest because by that time they actually know that they are looking, so they start getting some blinders kind of going on, and they start getting overwhelmed with people trying to get business from them.
Okay, cool. Anybody else that said phase 3? Jake or Nick? I think you guys are the only other ones that said phase 3.
Could be the biggest decision to make in my life, or one of the top decisions. So I don't want to screw this up. So there may
Okay.
be some hesitation.
Good. Okay, good. Okay, go ahead, Jake.
For phase 3, I would say it's because they're probably already actively working with an agent.
Okay, good. And Nick said 3 because it would be more high pressure, stressful time. Yeah, good. Everything you guys, the answer is the hardest one to get an appointment with is number 3. And it is for the reason you guys said. The reason number 3 is the hardest one to get an appointment with of the 3 is because during information gathering, they've made decisions, to use how Philip said it, is that to some extent they're putting on blinders that says, I'm not working with somebody like that. I've come in contact with somebody that is better, that I like along the way. And so the hardest part was somebody in the active phase. Active means they're looking for a property to buy. Like they're ready to go. And so that's why it's the hardest one to get. In actuality, probably the percolation is probably the easiest to set an appointment with. Now, to some extent, it is a little bit harder only because maybe skill set wise, but they're easier to get to agree to an appointment because they think they're not going to buy. And so they're like, when you know somebody's in percolation is if they say something like this to you. If you want to waste your time coming out, that's fine, but we're not doing anything. When you hear somebody say, if you want to waste your time, in essence, what they are telling you is they're in the percolation phase. Okay. So with all of this in mind, here's why I bring all this up, because I want to be really clear and making sure that you guys understand. As you're prospecting, you want to be looking for now and future. The process people are going to go through is this percolation, information gathering, and active. It is going to be normal for people to say to you, we're just looking. And probably the reason they say that is because they're either still in percolation or they're in the early phases probably of information gathering. And so they truly believe they are just looking and they're not going to do anything. You have to be able to have the ability to say, I totally get it. And in fact, I'm going to give to you, yeah, Jordan said, add them to your SOI. Perfect. I'm going to give to you the line you want to use over and over and over again in prospecting. When you are prospecting and somebody says to you, we're just curious, your next thing out of your mouth needs to be this. So make sure you get this written down. I work with my clients at their pace. So you're gonna repeat and affirm, which we haven't talked about yet. We're gonna get into that next. Is you need to repeat and affirm to them, and then you need to say, I work with my clients at their pace. Because when you say that to somebody who is in either percolation or information gathering, it helps them to relax.
When do you say this statement again? I'm sorry. I think I missed the first.
No, you're good. I work with my clients at their pace.
I know, I got that, but when do you say that statement? When they're saying they're if you want to waste your time or I'm just looking?
Yep, anytime somebody says, oh, we're not that serious about it, we're just curious, you're gonna go, oh, that's great. I work with my clients at their pace, so you don't have to worry about me trying to pressure you to do something. See, the thing that we as individuals are worried about is we've all had the experience of going onto a car lot and the car salesperson is saying to us, hey, what do I got to do to get you into a car today? We've all had that experience. They assume that's what you're going to try to do to them is, what do I got to do to get you into a house today? Well, selling a house does not work the same way as a car or a TV. In fact, remember I told you I had a deal that my wife said, if it doesn't close, you got to go get a job, a real job, which by the way, this is a real job I've learned since then. But that house, the guy that was the buyer of it, that really it was the seller. I was representing both sides, and the seller, it should not have sold because of the seller, not because of the buyer. But the buyer worked at a place that was called Granite Furniture, which you guys in California won't know what it is. Think of it as, what's the name of that furniture place that there's one in Simi Valley? Anyway. Well, here we would say RC Willey. There it's like Reds, there's something like that. I don't know.
Reds is the barbecue joint.
Ooh, that's right. I like that place too, actually. That's probably why I'm thinking of that. Reds and green.
We'll just call it Ashley Furniture.
Okay, call it Ashley. That works. Anyway, this guy worked selling electronics at Granite Furniture. And what happened is he then saw me selling real estate and started figuring out commissions. And he said to me, hey, I think I want to get my real estate license. And I said, hey, do it. You should come work at the office I work at. So in the process of him buying that house, it was a new construction one, we had the home built. And in the process of that, he went and got his real estate license. So by the time we closed on his home, he had his real estate license. Well, from there, he came and worked at my office. And I will tell you what, this guy could put deals under contract like nobody I've ever seen. Like every month he'd put 10 deals under contract, but none of them would ever close. Like literally very rare would they close, because he was approaching it like selling a TV. And it doesn't work that way in real estate. Meaning he would approach it, well, no, let's just write the offer. Let's just see what we can get. And it's not going to work that way with a house. Instead, with a house, you have to approach it with the client more like, hey, I work with my clients at their pace. And so look, I'm going to help you at your pace. I'm not worried about if you buy a house tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, because remember, and I might not say this to them, but I plan on being in business a year from now, and I'm going to need a deal then just as much as I do now. So I work with my clients at their pace. As soon as you say I work with my clients at their pace, it relaxes them that you're not going to try to push them into buying a house today. And I'm not going to. So that you want to make sure you're using that a lot with people. Hey, good news is I work with my clients at their pace. So you don't have to worry about me trying to pressure you to do something you don't want to do. Then they will relax, and now you can ask them then to take the next step along the way. Okay, questions? All right, I'm going to erase this then. We're going to go to the next thing. You guys doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm glad Sunshine is. Nobody else is apparently. All right. Next piece of this. Okay. So I told you the first thing that we had talked about is you got to have the focus. The next thing we just went through is I wanted to make sure you understand the buyer cycle, which, oh, I forgot to tell you. Guess how long the buyer cycle is, Jordan? And I'm saying Jordan only because
I thought you said 45 days.
no, that's the active part of the buyer cycle.
Oh, okay.
The whole thing from percolation to information gathering. I'm picking on Jordan just because he said in 9 months he was going to be making the 6-digit income. So he says could be a year. Yeah, it could be a year. Typically, though, that whole cycle is 6 to 9 months. Remember how long I said it's going to take for your SOI to be able to really take off and be able to plan on it? 6 to 9 months. The reason it's going to take that SOI 6 to 9 months is because you're capturing people in this percolation phase if you're doing it right, and it's going to take them 6 to 9 months. The other reason you're going to see that huge run up on your sphere of influence is because you're going to be gathering people along the way that are in percolation or information gathering that all of a sudden hit active about the same time, and so your business just skyrockets is what's going to happen. Now, I also am going to show you what's going to happen between now and then. Go ahead.
Russ, this is in regards to buyers only, right?
Nope.
Okay. So then let me ask you a question. So where are for sale by owners in that spectrum?
Good question. They're in the active phase. That's why they're so hard to get an appointment with.
Right.
Because it's a great question. So for a seller, what I have found on this percolation, information gathering, and active is usually with a seller, it's about a 12 to 18 month for them. They start percolating sooner than just the buyer. So,
And are expireds also in that category, or did they drop back?
Nope.
Okay.
Expireds are in the exact same. Well, to some extent, they may back up a little bit into information gathering, but typically it's one of two things. Either they really weren't serious to begin with, or they didn't have an agent to lead them through the process.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. So you got to have the focus. You got to understand this buyer cycle and the seller cycle. The next piece of this, so this is where we're going to go to next, is the next piece of your prospecting. We're going to talk about 3 things. You have to connect, you have to create value, and you have to close. Those 3 things have to happen in your prospecting. So remember, we talked about the process is getting out of contacts and into the appointment phase. The way that you're going to set appointments, the things that have to happen in order for you to set an appointment. So in your prospecting, you have to connect, you have to create value, and you have to close. Now, so what I want to talk about now for the next little bit is how do we connect? So we're going to get into the connecting piece of this. How do we connect with someone? So kind of just looking at the clock here, guys, how this is going to play out is I'm going to finish up this section. We're going to stop then. And then this afternoon, we're going to go through some ways to actually be effective. But keep in mind, what I'm teaching you now doesn't matter which way you're going to prospect. You have to do this. So that's why we're doing this piece first. And then, so last night after we were done with class, Dan and I talked on the phone a little bit, and he's got some for sale by owner. So this afternoon, we're going to really dive into the for sale by owner stuff specifically. But we're going to hit on expireds, and we'll hit on just listed and some of those stuff as well. Okay, but first, let's talk about connecting. The first thing that has to happen in order for you to set an appointment with somebody is you have to connect with them. There has to be a connection. Or you could think of it as, you could say it as rapport too, okay? So I've got to connect, and there's got to be some rapport built. Now, rapport is not necessarily, oh, you have a cat? I love cats. They're so cute. Like, that's not, you don't have to have that to have a connection or rapport. But you do have to have a connection with them. Now, let me explain what that means. The way that Tony Robbins says it, and I like the way he said it, the way that you connect with people is through this process. People like people who are like them or like who they want to be. Uh-oh, I just got some major warning on my computer. Some vulnerability protection signatures have been corrupted, whatever. All right. As long as you guys are still there, I'm going to keep going. So if you're not there, tell me.
We're here.
If you're there, you don't need to say anything. But if you're not there, tell me. Man, you guys are. At least Melanie smiled at least. So thank you, Melanie.
I laughed for you, Russ.
Okay, you were just muted, right? Okay,
That's
yeah.
right.
If you're not here, raise your hand. Okay, nobody raised their hand, so we're good. All right. People like people who are like them or who they want to become. So the way that you get a connection with somebody is by being like them or who they want to become. So the way people like people who are like them or who they want to become. Yeah, Jordan, I need a laugh track. I'm going to find one that I can just, and then I can have one of you guys play it so that at least I feel good that people are laughing at it. People like people who are like them or who they want to become. So now how can we do that in our prospecting? If people like people who are like them or who they want to become, how do we become that?
By finding out like the things they like to do, maybe what their motivation is for moving or the area they like to live in.
Okay, good. I like it. Philip, you started to say something?
Mirroring their vocal inflections, body language, things like that.
Good. Here's
Have
the thing.
genuine interest and ask questions.
Yes, love it, Sunshine. Thank you. Ultimately, what we need to do is, and so Philip said mirroring and matching them. So yes, we need to do some of that. But ultimately, what we've got to do is the number one human need that we all really have is to be accepted. So we want to be accepted. So the best thing we can do right out of the gate in our prospecting is we got to make people right. And too many times agents want to prove them wrong. Like they get on and want to tell people why they're wrong. So let's use Dan for sale by owners. Too many agents want to go in and tell that for sale by owner why they're wrong to be selling it for sale by owner. Well, how much rapport are you going to get with somebody by telling them they're wrong? Sorry, Sunshine, I talked over you.
I just said that I absolutely love that message.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
You
no,
are-
it's true. You're not gonna build rapport like that. It's better to compliment them on what they have done and tell them how we can improve it.
That's right. See, we want to be accepted and acknowledged. So the best way for you to get a connection and some rapport with people is make them right. So what you want to do is you need to repeat back what they said. So when somebody is talking to you, and so let's use for sale by owner for a minute, and I were to say to you, Dan, hey, so tell me why you decided to sell your home on your own rather than using a real estate agent.
Well, I don't want to pay a commission to anyone. I think I can do just as good of a job myself.
Okay, now, so watch this. So I'm going to say, so it sounds like really ultimately what you're saying is you want to not pay the commission. And really what that means is you want to walk away with as much money as you can from the sale of your home, right?
Well, of course, I invested the money in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, I think you're smart for thinking that way. See, is somebody going to be upset at me if I tell them you're smart for thinking that way?
No.
They're never going to be like, yeah, get out of here. Like, so make people right. So part of what we want to do is and the way we're going to do that is repeat and affirm. So now let me come back to knocking on doors for a minute. So let's go away from for sale by owner. I'm just out knocking on doors or I'm on the phone. So Melanie, will you role play with me?
Yes.
Okay. So if I call you on the phone, so ring, ring.
Hello,
Hi, I'm looking for Melanie.
Melanie.
Melanie, this is Russ with Century 21, and I just listed your neighbor's home over on Birch and Pine. It's got 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, and it's listed for $499,900. And I was just curious, who do you know that would want to move into the area? Now pay attention to how I do the repeat and affirm, okay?
I don't really know anybody that would like to.
You don't know anyone that would like to move into the area? Okay, well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to think about that. Let me ask you, when do you plan on moving?
Not anytime soon.
So you're not planning on any time soon? Huh, interesting. Okay, well, great. How long have you lived here?
3 years.
You've lived here for 3 years? Oh, that's great. Where did you move from?
Colorado.
From Colorado to here? You're kidding. What part?
I don't know.
Make it up. Denver.
Denver.
Oh, from Denver to here. Really? So what brought you here?
My job.
Really? So you can't, a job transfer brought you? Oh, that's great. What do you do for a living?
In banking.
Oh, you're in banking too? I used to be. That's awesome. Which I just screwed up, by the way. I shouldn't do that. I should not have said, oh, well, I was in banking too. Because that turns it into being about who? Me. So instead of that, so I just, FYI, you're going to screw up when you're prospecting. And if you do, catch it and then move on. So I just screwed up by going, oh, I was in banking too. Instead, I should, oh, well, what bank do you work for?
Wells Fargo.
Oh, for Wells Fargo. Wow, that's great. Well, so how did you happen to pick this neighborhood?
It was the nicest neighborhood at the time.
It was the nicest one you had looked at. That's awesome. What other areas did you look in?
Logan or Lehigh.
Logan and Lehigh, and ended up in Salt Lake. Wow, that's big areas. Awesome. Well, good for you. Well, hey, let me just ask you, if you ever were to move. Now, pause for a second. Remember percolation, information gathering, active? This is where I'm now going to hopefully either get an answer to figure out that she is active, or I might plant a seed. Okay, so watch. If you ever were to move, though, where would you go next?
I would go to Lehigh probably, it just depends.
So probably from Lehigh to here. That's great. So when would that be?
Not anytime soon.
No time soon. Okay. Well, hey, that's great. Well, I appreciate you talking to me, blah, 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 blah. Now, notice what I was doing on the repeat and affirm is I repeated back what she said, and I always gave some type of an affirmation, except for one time. The one time I didn't, and I intentionally did this, is I said, interesting. Now, when I said interesting is to place doubt a little bit in their mind. So, but notice for the most part, it was always, oh, good for you. That's great. Sorry, go ahead. Were you going to ask something, Savannah?
No, I actually just sneezed and realized I was not on mute.
Hey, don't sneeze over this. Like, this is not something to sneeze over. All right, let's see. Nick says, I feel like saying these things like, hey, I did that too, is something I do too often because I'm trying to relate. That's just it. Relating is not the same thing as getting a connection or rapport. And as soon as you make it about you by relating, you lose it. That's where I feel like you're going to lose that a little bit, because ultimately, if you keep it about them is where you get a connection. In fact, actually, let me give you guys a quick story. And this actually applies to, I saw yesterday, oh, I forgot to tell you guys, make sure you put in the chat box first name and last name and office again. I didn't notice anybody from the Ventura office, but I did notice somebody from the Oxnard office. So I want to share with you real quick though a story about this. And this goes back about 3 years ago. We were in Vegas for a company trip. We were down there for a seminar. And while we were down there, this was right after Everest had acquired the offices in California, is about this same time. Well, we had been talking about building connection and rapport. And we went to dinner, and it was a few of the managers from Utah going with some managers from California. Well, the person who was the manager at the Ventura office at the time, in fact, she may have been over Oxnard as well, but she was over the Ventura office, and we were in Vegas, and we sat down, and I had decided at dinner, I was not going to say one thing about myself. I was only going to talk about the other person, this manager. So I'm sitting across from the manager at Ventura office, and I just start asking questions. And I said, oh, well, so which office are you in? Well, and at that point, I had never been down to any of your offices then. I have been to all of them, I think now. But I had never been to any of the offices. And so I was asking her, so where's that at? And I said, well, so do you live in Ventura? And she said, no, I live in Ojai. And I was like, Ojai? I've never even heard of Ojai. Where's Ojai? And she starts telling me about Ojai and how Ellen DeGeneres lives there and all these movie stars that live in Ojai. And I'm just asking question after question. I just was peppering her and her husband with, well, so how long have you lived there? And how often do you see Ellen? And what's it like? And this and that. And she sat and just talked. And we were at dinner for an hour and a half. And the whole time I just asked question after question after question after question. When we got done with dinner, she said to me, you know, Russ, this has just been the most enjoyable dinner I think I have had in a long, long time. Now, why do you think she enjoyed the dinner so much?
Because she got to talk about herself.
That's right. The entire conversation was about her. If you will be interested and curious about people by asking questions, they love it. We love to talk about ourselves. And so as you do that and ask these questions, and then once they answer, if you will say, that's great. So you repeat back to them, wow, that's awesome. Good for you. Man, that's a genius thing that you did, whatever. If you affirm and make them right, they will love you. So that's the first thing we've got to do is we've got to connect with people. And the way you're going to do that is through asking questions, repeating what they say, and then affirming back to them, good for you. That's exciting. That's awesome. That's how we're going to get this connection. Okay? And until you do that, you have not earned the right to continue talking to them. But once you do it, you can now go to the next step, which is create value. You have got to create some type of value. So now, let me bring it back to for sale by owners, Dan. When you talk to the people, the first thing you've got to do, and we'll talk more about for sale by owners this afternoon, but I want to relate it to this. The first thing you've got to do is get them to be willing to talk to you. And you do that by telling them they're smart in what they're doing, not they're dumb. You're going to tell them that if you were them, you would do the same thing. So actually, I forgot. One other thing I want to add in connection to rapport is empathy. You got to empathize with people. So for sale by owner, when I ask, why are you doing it? And they say, I want to save the commission. You want to say to them, hey, if I were you, I would want to save the commission too. I totally understand where you're coming from. I get it. If I were you, I'd want to save the commission too. Ultimately, what you're saying to me is you want to make as much money as you can from the sale of your house. And they're going to go, yeah, that is exactly what it is. Now they feel like they're understood. And when they feel like they're understood, they're willing to talk to you longer. Now that they're talking to me, I can now create some value. The next thing you've got to do is create value. All right. The next book that I'm going to recommend that you read is The Secrets of Question-Based Selling. And I think Thomas Fries is the author, if I remember right. Secrets of Question-Based Selling. In that book, maybe you don't need to read it because I'm going to tell you what the best part is right now anyway. But here's what I loved in that book. He says you got to make people curious. So if I could put a slash up here, curious, but you've got to either create value or make people curious. No one is going to meet with you if they don't see value or if they're not curious as to what you could do to help them. They're not going to meet with you. But as soon as you make them curious or you create some value, they can see the value in talking to you. You can then get an appointment. But until they see value, they're not going to give you an appointment. So you got to create some value or make them curious. In that book, The Questions of Secret-Based Selling, here's what he said. He actually uses real estate as his example of making someone curious. And here's what he did, is he was working with a real estate agent that was trying to find farmers who wanted to sell their land so that he could then turn around and sell it to somebody else to develop it. And he would call people on the phone and get a voicemail and leave a message and nobody would call him back. And this guy, Thomas Fries, said, let me tell you how to do this. You got to make them curious. Nobody's going to call you back if they're not curious. And so what he did is he said, let me make the next phone call. So this guy gets on the phone, makes the phone call, gets a voicemail, and here's what he says in the voicemail. Hello, Mr. Farmer, whatever the guy's name was. He didn't say Mr. Farmer, but he says, hello, Mr. Farmer. I am standing here holding a copy of your tax records, which he had gotten a printout of. He said, I'm holding your tax records, and I have some questions for you about them. Please give me a call back. Do you think the person's going to be curious of why you're holding their tax records in their hand?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. And so guess what? The farmer called back, and he was able to talk to him and say, hey, let's set up an appointment. So you got to make people curious, or they've got to see value, or they don't want to talk to you. So if you ever leave somebody a voicemail, don't leave a voicemail the way most people leave it. Most people's voicemail sound like this. Hi, this is Russ with Century 21, and you signed up on my website, and I just wanted to get an idea what you're looking for. Give me a call back. They're not going to call you back, just so you know. You got to say something that creates value or makes them curious, or they're not calling back. So figure out a way to get them curious. So, hey, for sale by owner, Dan, you call a for sale by owner and you want them to call you back, do that. Get a printout of their tax records and go, hey, I noticed you had your home for sale by owner. I've got a copy of your tax records in my hand. I've got some questions. Give me a call. And then hang up. See, too many times we leave all of the information on the call and then they don't need to call us back. So you've got to do, so let me give you another example of this. You've got somebody, we talked about it yesterday actually. The whole thing yesterday when I said you got somebody in your sphere of influence that's not calling you back, the way you get them to call you back is you call and say, I've got a really important question for you, call me back. See, the reason I leave that message is it's hopefully going to make them curious of what my really important question is. And if they are, they'll call me back. Hey, what you said, you called and said you had an important question. What is it? Okay, so you got to create value or make them curious. So I'm going to say more about that. We'll talk about that this afternoon I'll get into more of that. And then the last piece is you got to close. And I'm going to just wrap it up and we'll stop until 2 o'clock Utah time, 1 o'clock California. There's only 5 ways in the English language you can ask for an appointment. And it's what time, which time, how soon, when, and where. Those are the only 5 ways in the English language you can ask for an appointment. So you got to close, and if you don't say one of those, you didn't ask for an appointment. If you say to somebody, is there a time we can get together? You're not asking for an appointment. If you say, can we get together? You're not asking for an appointment. If you say, would you like to get together? You're not asking for an appointment. You can only ask for an appointment by saying what time, which time, how soon, when, or where. If you say anything else, you're not asking for an appointment. Let me show you the very worst one we ever use. And that is, why don't we get together? Now, let me show you why that's the worst one you could ever use. Philip, why don't you give me some money? Okay, Shawan, why don't you give me some money?
I don't know you.
Yes, you do. Don't lie.
Because you're asking them to give you a reason why they can't.
That's right. Notice that. Notice what I'm doing is asking them a reason why they can't give me money, and what do they give me? The answer why.
A reason why you can't. Yeah.
Guess what you're going to get if you ask somebody, hey, why don't we get together and talk more about you buying or selling your house? Guess what they're going to tell you?
Excuses.
The reason you're not going to get together.
Yeah.
See, don't ever use that. Instead, we got to say, hey, which time would be better, afternoon or evening? What time would work best for you? How soon could you get together? Where should we meet? And when would you like to go see that house? Those are the only ways you can ask for an appointment. All right.
Hey,
Sorry, I
Ray.
was long-winded. Go ahead.
There's a glare on the board. What is the second thing that you wrote under what time?
Hey, you can just be honest and say your handwriting's horrible. So it's what time
Uh-huh.
and which time,
Which time? Okay.
how soon, when, and where. So, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So, be back here in 2 hours. So 1 o'clock California time, 2 o'clock Utah. And we're going to then get into, we're still going to build on this, but we're going to do it in specifics with prospecting around for sale by owners, expireds, just listed, internet leads, whatever. Sound good?
Hey, Russ.
Yes.
I know you're recording these sessions. Is there a way that we're able to get a copy of them just like for review in the future?
Yeah,
I
great
was
question.
gonna ask that same thing.
Absolutely. In fact, I actually meant to, I keep meaning to have them be streaming live to YouTube as we're doing this, but I keep forgetting to start the YouTube. So
You did it yesterday.
yeah, I did yesterday, but all of them are going to be there. So this one probably won't go up until either later today sometime. But yeah, all of them, if you go to YouTube and search Peak Agent Training, so Peak, P-E-A-K, Agent Training, you'll find the channel and all of the videos are on there. So I'm trying to remember to do it, but I've only remembered once to actually get it started so that they're there immediately. But the rest of these, I'll download it and then out of Zoom and put it up there.
Perfect. Thanks, Russ.
Cool. Okay, see you guys in a couple of hours. Unless you have
Russ,
Yeah,
just an FYI, I'm gonna be out prospecting, so I'm gonna be back on the call at 1, but you know, I may be cutting in and out.
Okay,
Just a heads
no worries.
up. All right, cool.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Talk to
Thanks.
you later.